And here with more is Pete Hoekstra, a former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and Michael Waltz. He's a former Green Beret commander and a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, thank you for joining tonight. Congressman, if I could start with you and the fact, let's go back to the tweet that John Roberts talked about, the photograph that President Trump put forward today. President Xi was not there, and President Trump had put a lot of pressure on China to try to force Pyongyang to give up this effort to try to get nuclear weapons. What do you think that the Chinese take away from this, based on your experience as the former Intel chairman?
Well, I think what the Chinese take away from this is that, number one, the United States, South Korea, and Japan are going to put together a united front to try to convince China to be more aggressive in its actions towards North Korea. Obviously, the discussions that the president has had with the Chinese has not had the desired outcome. So we need to make sure that there's no distance, no space between South Korea, Japan, and the United States as we try to engage China to do what we believe is in all of our best interests.
So you had an interesting point about the South Koreans and their approach. I mean, how serious can they be when they look at this? They're looking to actually change the approach that we've had for the last several decades.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's the area where we need to close the most space. North Korea is launching missiles. South Korea is delaying the installation of, 6 new missile batteries that the United States has provided to them because they're going to do an environmental study, which may take up to a year. Talk about sending mixed messages. That's why I think this meeting tonight is so important, that the 3 countries do present a united front, because right now they're not.
I think that's an excellent point, and I didn't know about the environmental impact study until you mentioned it earlier today. Michael, you say that the Chinese calculus needs to change and fast. How can we possibly do that? Is a meeting like tonight's part of the way to do that? And then you also have a point about sanctions, not just against U.S. companies doing business in North Korea, but Chinese companies doing that kind of business.
Well, that's right, Dana. You know, what I hope did not happen at that meeting tonight was kind of pulling out the old playbook. I mean, you and I remember from the Bush administration the 6-party talks that ended up going nowhere, and of course the Clinton administration's agreement, only bought the North Koreans more time. What I'd like to see is what we call secondary sanctions. Right now, there's this notion that we're kind of maxed out in the sanction regime. What we need to start doing is hitting Chinese banks, more than just the one that we hit last week, and other Chinese companies and entities that are doing business with North Korea. That's what worked against Iran, is when we told the rest of the world, look, if you do business with these entities, then we're not going to do business with you. And that's when everything started clamping down, and really started clamping down, in this case, on the North Korean pocketbook. The other thing I just wanted to add on to the Congressman's point about missile defense, I think we could get much more aggressive in the missile defense arena and start shooting down these rockets as they're test fired. That is coming very close to what I think could be called a provocation, but we need to start pulling new measures out, because between now and the North Koreans, being able to put a nuclear tipped missile on the launch pad is incredibly dangerous. And then finally, Dana, I think we need to talk to the Chinese and have a hard conversation about regime change if none of those measures work.
Let me ask you then about that, Congressman, because regime change to what? Because I was out talking to somebody today who's studied North Korea for a long time. Where do you go? I mean, there's the rest of the family. That might not be the best idea. The military seems to be totally bought in. Is there anybody in North Korea that could actually take over if there were to be regime change?
I think that's a great question. If there is somebody, I don't think we know, or we're not aware of that person. The South Koreans are not. The Japanese are not. The Chinese might have somebody in mind, but there's no name that comes forward. The Chinese are not going to engage in regime change if they're not even going to try to put pressure on the North Koreans.
That's right. Michael, last word to you, and then we're going to run.
Well, in terms of the Chinese calculus, right now they're more afraid of a collapsed North Korea with a refugee problem that they're going to have to deal with, or a unified Korean peninsula that's friendly to the U.S. If all of those other options fail, and the choice the Chinese have is war or putting their own folks in place, and I guarantee you the Chinese have reach into the regime, then I think that's a viable option for us to talk to the Chinese about and say, look, either you guys control this or we will, because war is in no one's interest on the peninsula. It truly would be devastating.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll continue to check back in with you.
All right.